In today's show, we discuss, is time travel possible and the repercussions of it if it was possible.
And now, the TNT Talk Show, daring to go where other podcasts fear to tread.
Hello, I'm Tony Fasulo and I share the stage with my esteemed friend and colleague, Tayo Boya. Tayo, hello, my friend, once again. I hope you're keeping safe and well.
Yeah, what the hell, Tony? What you gonna do, eh?
Come on, let's keep up with our tradition. I don't know whether I should ask, but I'm gonna anyway. Come on and say hi to our audience.
That's the audience, Tony. Hello, audience. Whatevs, you know. This. I don't know for the audience. I don't know when this video is coming out, when we're publishing this podcast, but last weekend was the New Year's weekend, 2022 into 2023. And I went down to Milton Keynes with the wife, and they had some lovely wooded areas there, some really lovely walks. And we got to this particular clearing, or well, not really a clearing, a copse of trees. And there were all these names of lovers and engraved on the trees, very romantic, with the hearts and the arrows and everything. And my wife was like, "Oh, isn't this cute?" And I said, "Well, that's one way of looking at it, but what I'm really worried about is the number of people, lovers, who are walking around with knives."
Oh,
We couldn't engrave our names on the trees because we didn't have a knife, which, in my opinion, is how it should be. It's like, what the heck are you doing with a knife?
oh, well, that's very true. Very true. Does beg the question, indeed. Gosh, I'm actually not cringing. That's a really good one. I'm actually pleased. Hooray!
I must try harder then, as my teachers always used to say.
Anyway, in today's show, we're going to discuss, is time travel possible? And if it is possible, what are the repercussions of it? Now, I know this was one of my topics, Tayo, but I wanted to ask you what your thoughts on this particular subject are. Are they a bit wacky, or do you have any thoughts?
Completely wacky. I mean, I don't think this show is going to be. It's going to be very long. He says, if time travel is impossible, if time travel is possible, what are the possible repercussions, right?
Yeah.
Well, time travel isn't possible, ergo there are no repercussions. Yep. I believe video done. Right? That's it.
Well,
it's like,
let's be honest. There's a fascination, in fact, of all humans, funny enough, about the prospect of time travel, of whether it could be true or not. And even Einstein himself has postulated that it could be possible. And he's even come up with, what's it called? The wormhole. There's actually a word for it. It's an Einstein-Rosen bridge. For people who are not familiar with what a wormhole is, it's a hole in space.
A folding of space.
A folding in a way where you can get through it quicker than if you traveled around. So it's bending space. And these anomalies, in theory, mathematically, can exist. But we've obviously not detected any, if there are any. And Hollywood, in all the films, because we've this is where it all comes from as well. We've embedded this notion of traveling through time through popular Hollywood films, certainly through books, and there's countless examples which we'll touch on, and the way that they view time travel. And we'll maybe touch on a couple of the films. And I know you're a bit of a connoisseur of films, Tayo. So whether, even if some of these things were possible, could the repercussions, if they were true, that what would happen to our world if we could, in fact, time travel. And the question may be as well, is it time travel that we could possibly do? Is it time travel to the future, or is it only time travel to the past? So we can observe what happened in the past, but we can't really alter it. That's my personal view. I think that we can't, even if we did find a way of time traveling, I think going to the future we can't do, because the future hasn't been created yet. But we may be able to go to the past and observe it firsthand, but observe it like a video where you can see it, you can see everything that's going on, but you then can't change it. I'm not of the opinion that you could go back and maybe dabble with it and change it. And the typical one is that a lot of people seem to bring up in films and in documentaries: if you could time travel, would you go back in time and kill Hitler, for instance, before he did all the atrocities? But you've now affected the future. So would you still be around in order to go back in time to change it? So you create a paradox there. It's like if you went back in time and interacted with your grandfather and somehow persuaded him not to meet with your grandmother, then you may not exist. So what happens to you? Do you see what I mean? These are all paradox scenarios.
The old Back to the Future conundrum.
Yeah, Back to the Future, exactly. And this is what I'm saying about popular films have addressed time travel in many, many ways. Some look at it in the example we've given there, where time travel in the film Back to the Future, he goes back in time and he almost, the main character, Marty McFly, goes back and interferes with his parents meeting up, and therefore messes up the chances of them getting together, and he then could end up not existing, and that was apparent as part of the film. Sorry for the spoiler there, those of you that haven't seen that film.
If you haven't watched Back to the Future by now, grow up.
Indeed, it's a classic. I mean, obviously, there's other films as well that touch on.
Let me say something here.
Yeah, please.
I've never watched a single time travel movie that didn't have an essential plot hole in it, because I believe it's actually impossible. We can't even conceive of a logically consistent time travel movie. There's always going to be something wrong with the plot, because there's always something fundamentally wrong, inherently wrong with this idea of time travel. The second you talk about time travel, you instantly introduce the prospect of meeting yourself. And once you've met yourself, you've done something that is paradoxical. So time travel is inherently paradoxical. But it's not paradoxical in a good way. There's some paradoxes. When I was 17 or something, this is a bit of a brag. When I was 17 or something, I hit upon the notion of designing what I call a paradox engine, which is a way of trying to present a truth as a paradox, because then you know you're right. Because even if it is false, it is true. And if it is true, it is true. So it is true. You see what I mean?
Can you give an example of that? Because I'm quite confused, and I suppose our listeners and watchers may be confused as well.
Your fundamental paradox is this. The next thing I'm about to say is true.
Okay.
The last thing I said just now was a lie.
Yep, that's a paradox.
Yeah.
Because you don't know which one's correct.
Well, I was lying. But if I was lying, then the truth was a lie, but then that made that what I said true.
Yeah.
Which made it a lie. But then because it's a lie, it's true.
Yes.
You see?
Very good.
Yeah.
Good.
So if you can think of if you can design what I call a paradox engine, if you could design one, you'd always be right. But meeting yourself is a paradox in which it's always wrong. You shouldn't be. I mean, it's inherently flawed. Like you said, the way you introduced it was like the way Back to the Future introduced it was, you could kill yourself.
Hmm.
Well, how does that work then?
Yeah.
You never existed. So who's doing the killing? That's what I mean. It doesn't make any sense.
Which is personally not the way I view it. I view it in a different way. I view it in so much as you are looking at a video. Like I've said, I think if it's a bit like I don't know if you've seen various versions of the Christmas Carol. Yeah.
Yes.
You know,
Well,
Scrooge
I
and all the rest.
I don't really like it. I didn't really like it. So, but
Okay.
I understand.
We understand
plot.
the principle. And what happens in that, just for the benefit of those again that haven't watched that or read the book Christmas Carol, is Scrooge is shown his past and his current life and the future, but he can't interact with it because it's the past. So he can view it like you would a video. It's like if we would be able to time travel, you would be able to see the past. And in a way, we're not traveling, but when we observe starlight from a star that's shining at us and we observe it, we only see the instance of when the light was emitted from that star. The same with our sun.
Ah, yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, the same with our sun. We are not traveling back in time per se, but we are observing the sun, even now in the sky when it's there, 8 minutes in the past, because it's taken 8 minutes from the light of the sun to reach our eyes. So in those 8 minutes, the sun could have blown up, but we would be blissfully unaware of it until the light had reached us. So in a way, when we look at stars in the sky, we're looking at those stars as we would a time traveler. You're looking at them as they were, however many light years it takes for that light to reach us. Why are you wiggling your hand?
Because
that's an absolute fact. And now I want
because it's worse than that. I tried to explain this to my brother and his wife once, and they didn't grasp it. They thought I was crazy. When you look up at the sky at night, you're seeing a mirage. You're seeing something that never existed, never ever ever existed. There's no such sky, and there never has been, because nothing is where it was when the light started traveling.
Indeed, it's moved around. Right?
It's all moved around, but if you could instantly zip back to where each one was, right? Because it took different amounts of time to get to us, they won't be there. They won't all be where they are.
No.
So there's no such thing. There was never such a thing as that sky night.
No.
Yeah, that's why I say it's not time travel. It's more like a mirage. It's fake. It's a falsehood.
Well, no, because you're actually seeing that light as it was. So in a way, it's time travel because you're seeing it as it was. Like in the case of our sun, you're seeing the light from the sun from 8 minutes. There's an 8-minute delay. So you're seeing it 8 minutes in the past. You're not seeing it now. You see it as it was 8 minutes ago.
I'm not saying you see it now. I'm saying that if you look at the sun and you look at the moon, the light from the moon, let's say the moon, and sometimes they are visible at the same time, simultaneously, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But the light from the moon only takes a quarter of a second to reach us.
Yes.
The light from the sun takes 8 minutes.
Yeah.
But the sun and the moon were never 8 minutes and a quarter of a second away from each other. Do you understand? In the way we are perceiving it.
I understand the overall thing is false.
So what I'm saying is that's not time travel. That's a lie. Maybe if you just looked at the sun alone or the moon alone,
Yes.
you can treat it like that. But
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
once you put it into this relative relationships with other things, then it's not time travel. It's bogus. And maybe
Well,
from the point of view of your thesis, if you went back into time and met yourself, maybe that self to self thing would be like the sun being 8 minutes past, but everything else around you would be slightly out of sync and not right, if you see what I mean. That would be
possibly.
bogus too.
But like now, have you seen any videos of yourself when you were younger?
Unfortunately, there's a video of me jumping up and down like a lunatic thinking I was dancing. And I wasn't even that much younger. I was in my early 20s. It's quite embarrassing. And our friend Tiffany, who's been a guest on our show, derives no greater pleasure than to remind me that she's actually got evidence. If I ever become something in life, she's going to make a lot of money getting me to suppress it.
Oh, brilliant. I'd like to see that. And you must share that with our audience.
Never see it.
But you see what that is? That's a moment in time.
Yeah.
The same with a photograph. A photograph is not just a photograph. A photograph is almost like an imprint of a past event. You're not time traveling, but when you're looking at a photograph, you're seeing an image of what whatever the image is depicting back then. So it is time travel per se, because you're viewing something in its previous state. And I've got photos of my parents, photos of grandparents. Unfortunately, they're no longer here, but you're seeing them at that moment in time in the past. So even though you're not traveling per se, you've caught the essence of the past in the photo. Do you see what I mean? And films do a similar thing, where you can put on a film that you find of I don't know, Clark Gable. He's no longer here, but you can see him in action as if you traveled back to that era, and you can see him acting, but you're seeing him in the film.
Even better than that, you can find on YouTube, and I watch a lot of these, you can find colorized and normalized film from the 1900s, from the very dawn of video. And somebody has taken the time and trouble to colorize them and to normalize them. And you're looking at something, you go to 1908, and you're looking at this street in London, and you're seeing the horses and the carriages and the very early cars and women in long dresses. This is back in the day, guys, when men were men and women were women. And you think to yourself that everyone you're looking at there has passed on. And you're back, it's a pity you can't do the smells and the sound. Well, you can do some of the sounds, I think. Some of them have got kind of scratchy sounds. But it's just astonishing. You're just back, figuratively speaking, back in, whenever it was. Like there's one about Piccadilly Square from 1908. I think I said 1908. And I vaguely remember, I vaguely recognize, some of a few of the buildings. Shows you how old London is, and the square itself. But everything is so different. It's amazing. That is a form of time memory. That's memory. That's not traveling. For me to be actually in there at that time, that would be an issue. I always like to think that it's a gift. It's an advantage of being white. I think I said this at the Toastmasters Club once. It's an advantage of being white. You can think about time travel in such a cavalier fashion. If I could go back 200 years. Well, if I went back 200 years as a black guy, I'd have to be very careful where I went. Yeah, okay. Otherwise I could end up in South America or somewhere, God knows where, under very invidious circumstances indeed.
That can apply also to white people if they went to the Far East, for instance. So it is what it is, and
It's
obviously
just,
white people
but you
discovered
got a
that in
sort of wider
indigenous
range
areas.
that you
Yeah,
can go back to without being too uncomfortable. But if
yeah,
you went back to the wrong place at the wrong time, I mean, if you went back into Arabia, for instance, there was a time, obviously, when European slaves were highly sought after by the Turks. So there we
yeah.
have it.
So that's the time
The
element.
Barbary Coast, remember?
Yes, indeed.
For our
So
viewers
yeah,
who
so
don't
it's
know.
not. It wasn't all pleasant going back.
No, no, and the way society is going, I think we're headed into a new dark age, just as bad as the former dark age. I don't even know how pleasant it would be to go into the future. Um, there's a rumor, not a rumor, it's more than a rumor, but I haven't done the research. I've only seen a couple of videos and one article in Forbes, which I believe is a magazine, isn't it? Forbes. I've seen one article in Forbes and I've watched a couple of videos. And as I said to you the other day, um, Canada is making it easier to face euthanasia because you're poor. That's the beginning of your ultimate dystopian future. So I don't know what life is going to be like in 150 years. If you could time travel, would you want to?
Well, that's the whole point of the thing about time travel is the curiosity element. We're curious of what it would be like knowing what happens in the future. How do things turn out? And I think the fascination there is greater about the future than the past, because the past, you can research the past. Well, you know a lot about it now, especially our recent past. That's well documented, and even the internet is recording everything that happens on the internet. So I mean, there's peta or exabytes of data stored per day, so that we keep a memory of what happens on the internet, and so in the future you can go back and see it.
Actually, sir, you're incorrect. There's a project now trying to detail the fact that somebody somewhere is deleting the internet.
Oh,
And I invite people to go onto their favorite search engine and search for the internet is being deleted. So if you go into a favorite search engine, let's be honest, if you go into the world's biggest search engine, you find that you have pages. It would say like maybe 50 pages. So if you navigate to the 50th page, another 100 pop up, and if you go to the 100th page, you get another 150 or whatever it is, correct? But if you try to go all the way back, you find that whenever you click on a link, it says page not found, page not found, page. So the links are there, but there's nothing behind them. And where have they gone? So there was supposed to be this other project, I think was sponsored by the US government, where they were actually archiving all this material so that it never disappears.
mm-hmm.
Well, it's not there, pal.
You sure they're not archiving and removing it?
Well, if they are archiving it, clicking on the link doesn't tell you where. It's just gone. And this can do this for any subject you like. It's simply gone.
That's interesting.
Okay, and that's
Scary as
one thing
well.
you said. And the other thing you said is you'd be more interested in going to the future than going into the past. I have a need to go into the past. I want to know what happened to the dinosaurs, man. I want to see, Atlantis, which some people are now really certain, not without some evidence, that was in what is today currently Mali in West Africa. Right?
Okay.
I want to know how those stones were built, how those temples were built in Babylon. Remember, we've spoken about it.
Yeah, yeah, those big rocks that
Those big
were
rocks, this is
tons,
astonishing.
90 tons each. It just couldn't be lifted without being broken.
What
It's just,
happened to the people? What happened to the people in on the Easter Islands?
mm,
How did they build those Maui? I think they're called
Maui stones, which are
Maui stones,
huge.
right? What happened to the travelers, whatever they're called, the sailors and the people aboard the Mary Celeste? And there's so many mysteries
There
to go
are. I
back
mean,
and
not
look at.
saying it's not
Nobody wants to go
appealing.
in the future to do what? Who cares? Far in the future will never be my problem. But in fact, going to the past is not really my problem, but I'd love to know what the heck
Love to
happened.
know. It's your curiosity as well. But I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. But a lot going back to the
Wouldn't you like to
angle,
meet Jesus?
if he indeed existed.
I don't think anybody's suggesting seriously if some a historical figure did exist, but pretty sure
There is
it's not.
some doubt as to whether he was exactly who they're claiming,
Oh
but
yeah, yeah. Well, yes, but I think there
but
was a person, yeah,
whether there
sure,
was a name Jesus and
a
you said
teacher.
and did
Mm.
what he did. So that
Mm.
I mean, yeah, that obviously I'll be told differently by various people,
I
but
might be killed for it, but I'd love to meet my hero, Genghis Khan.
why is he your hero?
Oh, because he just had a very no-nonsense approach to, he had my attitude, or maybe my attitude is maybe I don't think I borrowed it from him. It's just it's my attitude. You roll up to a town or a city and you give them one chance to surrender. Say, look, guys, come up, bow down before me, bring out your wealth, and we'll be friends. You
We'll be
don't
friends.
do
So
that.
what? He's like a mafia.
Yeah. If you don't do that, I will raise your town to the ground. And when he said he's going to raise your town to the ground, his instructions were always do not let two stones stand one upon the other. Kill the men, kill the women, kill the children, kill the dogs, kill the cats, kill the sheep, kill the goats, kill everything. And we're not even going
Why?
to take
What?
anything
Okay.
away.
Why? I mean, we're digressing from the topic of the travel himself, but because we've touched on this, you'd like to go back in time to meet him.
Mm.
Why is he someone who you admire? Because this is not making you
He is
stand in a
he's
good
such a no
light.
nonsense figure. See, you do that once, you do it a second time. That's what he did. And when you come up to the third city, peace and quiet. And that's how it should be. You know, you demonstrate
So
power.
fear and power is what you like.
I love the no nonsense attitude about it. It's black and white. It's, look, are you sensible or are you stupid? You know, we know what to do.
So you
But
you you like the fact that people should be subservient to one or two despots like him.
I mean, you can be subservient to a despot, or you can be subservient to a bunch of liars who pretend that you are voting in, but you're not doing anything, and you're still subservient. There's no getting away from it. We are not at the top of the food chain, guy. So understand where you are in life and deal with it. You know, what are you
When
going to
we're
do
not
about
at
it?
the top of the food chain, what do you mean in the human population in terms
Yeah,
of we're not where we think we should be?
we're not anywhere. We're two old geezers in the Midlands in the UK. We got zero power to do anything. We
But we've
can't
got
even
the
get our.
freedom of speech to discuss
We
half
haven't
the
got the
topics that
freedom of
we do.
speech. We
Under
we we
Genghis
we
Khan,
skirt.
under Genghis Khan, we wouldn't be able to discuss half the
Oh,
stuff that we're talking
I
about.
don't know. You could always, talk about how wonderful a king, a
Well,
monarch he is.
that's not what you believe. So why would you say it?
Peace and quiet. You didn't really want the great Khan. That's his name. The great Genghis great. You didn't
Dear
want the
me.
great Khan to take
No,
over.
because the fact that he showed this brutality
Yeah,
does not
and his
elevate him
people.
in my eyes. And the
And
same with
then
any
the way the
distant
Mongol
ruler.
hordes just swept across, you know, Asia Minor and just all the way up into Europe and everything. It was a remarkable feat. Just incredible,
But you don't
incredible. And
admire
the only
that, do
reason they
you?
failed
You
was they
can
came so
understand
close.
it's a remarkable feat, but surely that's not something you admire.
No, I do. I deeply admire him. I deeply admire him. Unlike, for some funny reason, unlike our German friend, I don't admire his thing because it just his his wasn't the exercise of power. His was the exercise of lunacy, and I wouldn't want to go back in time and meet Hitler. He wouldn't want to meet me, by the way. So I think we're both in accord on that score. I'm not fascinated by him. I don't admire him. That was an exercise in lunacy. I don't know what he was trying to achieve. Stalin, I admire for his brutality, but I have since learned about some of the mistakes he made, and I think he he made a lot of mistakes by not being able. to allow people to speak their minds. Because if you're surrounded by yes men, you will never find out what's really going on, and it's a flaw.
But that's what the fear culture creates.
Yeah.
If you create an element of fear and you become a dictator and people only become yes men, you don't find out what the truth is.
But
And
under
that
the
makes
Ganges,
you
under
vulnerable.
Khan, they had
the
the
same with any
handkerchief.
despot in this world
No.
currently today.
Under the Khan, you had the handkerchief of relief. I think it was called the kerchief of relief. And if you held it, if you were given the kerchief of relief, right, you could tell him anything and you'd be fine. But only if you were given it. It's like, it's like you hold on to this, all right, talk, right? And then when you put it down, it's back to shut up. But whilst you held it, you could tell him what you thought. And that is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. You get to hear what's really going on.
Interesting. But anyway, we've digressed
Now,
slightly.
I was talking about who I want to meet going back.
Yeah. Okay. And you said you wouldn't go back. Would you think about the stopping certain despots from doing what they did?
No. I believe the world is, no, we've discussed this, like a virtual reality. So I believe that things have been worked out. I don't think you could.
Well, if it's a virtual reality and worked out, that means it's a simulation rather than a virtual reality.
No, a simulation is when you and I have no motive will.
Exactly. Well, simulation is that everything has no motive will.
But if it's a virtual reality, we do have motive will.
Okay.
It's just that this is not ultimately real, but we do have will. We do make choices. Our choices are ours.
And our choices affect the environment?
Yep, it affects the environment and everything.
Then that
but
case,
the super
the
intelligence that's behind all this is a super intelligence, and it is so mind-bogglingly intelligent that it can arrange things, even though we are making free choices.
So what's the point? And if where's the evidence for that statement?
Mostly it comes from my listening to young children who remember things and my piecing together what I see as pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, but even those young children, who I've obviously heard as well, they don't go on to say that there's this super intelligent being which is revered in godlike status. They never.
No, they don't. Actually, he's the person they meet comes across as a very kindly being, and Mr. God, and I think the children are just trying to use a term that they've heard in school, but it comes across as one of many. It's almost like there's a committee or something up there. It's just not. It is like I don't know. It's like a game to me. It's like a simulated, a virtual reality with just super intelligent being or beings behind it.
Okay, but then
where did the moon come from? Wouldn't you like to find out? Wouldn't you want to go back in time and figure out where the heck the moon came from?
My point is, why are you going to go back and see where the Big Bang started, if it was possible?
Yeah, I don't believe in the Big Bang.
No, but something happened.
So, well, yeah. So where did this all start?
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah, that'd be fun. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, it would.
Put that palaver to bed. And so there's so many things to go back to. And maybe when you've satisfied, when you've quenched your curiosity, quaked your curiosity, then you could start thinking about going to the future. But I don't know. I'm not really that interested in the future. Who cares?
I don't know. I'm fascinated about being able to go to the past if that were possible. Certainly,
What would you want to go in the future?
What would I want to know?
Where would you go? What do you want to see?
I want to see whether we've actually figured out some of the problems that we've currently got. Whether we've solved the problems with the planet. Have we managed to solve the problem with the climate, for instance? Did we do enough, or did it all turn to poo? Pardon my language. Do you see what I mean?
Idea, because I'm not sure there is a problem with the planet.
Well,
so that's the first thing.
Clearly, there is a problem in terms of it being heated, and it's certainly more heated than it has been
Yeah, but
in
it's
the
been hotter
past.
before, hasn't it?
No, it's hotter now.
No, it's been hotter in the past. It's been way
The
hotter
the
than this in the
scale
past.
of heat rise is hotter now, and it's remember when we discussed this in a show about
Mm.
the carbon
Yeah, I never
element. Yeah,
accepted
but you
anything you
never
said.
accepted it, even though I'm telling you a fact that the carbon element it's more prevalent, and that carbon only comes from burning fossil fuel, and it's more
I still
prevalent
don't
in the
understand that,
atmosphere.
to be honest.
How can you
They
not
all had two.
understand
They
it?
all had two blooming isotopes of carbon. It's carbon 12 and carbon 14. So I
Yeah,
don't know what other carbon you're talking about.
it was carbon 14, if I remember, and it was more prevalent, and that only gets created by burning fossil fuels. It does
No, it
not.
doesn't. There's
It
always been
does.
carbon 14. There's been
We'll
carbon
have to go
14 for
back to our
thousands of
show. I
years.
can't remember the exact carbon
Yeah,
molecule.
if we're going to have to redo that, because frankly, I think you got a hold of the wrong end of the stick. We've
No.
always had carbon 14. It's the basis behind carbon dating. So there
Carbon
was no
14,
industrial. There
that's
was no
right. But
industrial.
you're
Yeah.
you're putting words into my mouth here. I can't remember which carbon
Okay, I'm not trying to
carbon
put words.
element it was, but it showed that it was prevalent based, it's only created by burning fossil fuels.
You need to send me that research so that I can have a look at it. Then we can talk about
Well,
it
we did
again.
it when we were in the show. We will have to find the back episode of the
All
show to
right.
cover that. But anyway, that
Hmm.
aside, I would love to go to the future to see how things have transformed going forward. Have we embraced some new technologies which are just on the horizon? Have we eradicated diseases? Have we managed to travel in space and be able to colonize other planets? Has the planet Earth been destroyed, and we as a human race have had to move on to other planets? These are the sorts of questions I would love to know if you could time travel and see whether you can get answers in the future, if that's occurred.
I
Or
wonder if he'd even
did we have a
understand.
world war again where the planet was decimated? You see, these are the things that pique my curiosity as well.
Yeah, it's not very sort of optimistic though. You're gonna find out there's a world war in the future, and then what? What a drag! And by the way, what was I going to say now? I wonder if you would understand what you're looking at in the future. Can you imagine someone from the 14th century? You know, when Copernicus was staring through his
Yeah.
telescope at the sun. So can you imagine bringing even someone as clever as that, or someone as clever as Da Vinci, who was a genius? Let's face it, right? A multi-talented genius. Imagine bringing him to this year. How much of that would he even understand? If he was, say, here for a couple of hours or something, he wouldn't. I wonder what report he would give if he was to return to his time. I haven't seen me and you talking. Would he understand that there's an actual you on the other side? Or, of
Well, if you
seemingly.
explain it to him, the thing is, he was a scientific man,
Hmm.
so he would he would actually be more open-minded to new technologies. Like the majority of people here in the Western world, let's be honest, if we were moved into a future time, the majority of people would be, amazed, flummoxed, but they would be curious because our minds are more curious now anyway. We question so much more.
Have you
If
ever
you've
seen a
got if you're
Japanese
suffering
toilet?
from dogma and you believe a certain thing is a certain way, then
Hmm.
you're closed-minded and you wouldn't be able to comprehend. And I totally agree with you. If that sort of individual was brought to the future, they wouldn't understand what they're looking at. But that's because they're closed mind to begin with.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen a Japanese toilet
Have I?
Mhm.
Yes,
with all the buttons and everything?
I have. Didn't
Okay.
understand them, but I
Well,
managed to get it to work.
that's just a flipping toilet.
Yeah.
Even the concept of when I saw one, I've never been to Japan. I saw one on a TV show. I was thinking to myself, I would be, I wouldn't know what to do. I'd approach the toilet with fear almost.
Trepidation.
Trepidation. Thank you. I love the word trepidation. It's like what because in your mind is like, well, that's flush. Okay, that's maybe like a B-day thing. So what is the other 20 buttons for? It's mind, and that's in my era. That's in my era, you
Yeah,
know.
but that's that. But it's still a toilet, and you can
Well,
figure it out. You
yeah,
wouldn't
but
be you
somebody
wouldn't be
who,
overawed by it. You'd go, "Oh my goodness me, what are
but
all
Da
these buttons
Vinci,
for?"
who probably was using a hole in the ground, I don't know if you know what that is.
He wouldn't. But
No,
if
he
someone
wouldn't exactly.
explained to him,
And then
because
no,
that's
no,
the
no, and then
point.
he saw it for 1 hour, and then he went back to his time.
Well,
What
that's
would he
different.
say?
If it's the same with time travel, we now put a finite time on it. I thought the whole point of time travel mean that there isn't a time limit on it. If you're now saying
Many
you can only,
many films do say that you can only. Um, there was a film with Denzel Washington and Paula. Is that Hatton? Well, I can't remember the name. She was in Ghost Protocol with Tom Cruise. Uh, Patton, Paula Patton, and
okay,
Denzel Washington. And it starts out that there's this tremendous atrocity in New Orleans, I think, in America, where a terrorist blows up hundreds of people on a pleasure cruise, on a pleasure boat. And Denzel Washington is seconded by a secretive government organization. At first, they tell him that, very much like you are saying, that they can triangulate satellites and they can go back 4.5 days and they can see what happened 4.5 days ago, but it's always 4.5 days. Do you
okay.
understand? And then he cleverly understands that, hang on, I'm interacting with those people, because he shines a light into onto the screen, and the Paula Patton, the actress, she reacts to it. He said, "Aha! I know you're talking nonsense. Look, she's reacting to," and and things like this.
But
That
that's just
I
a film. I mean, that's the whole point of what the premise we're saying. The
Yeah,
film's
but no, but
Hollywood.
and then he gets sent back into the 4.5 days to try and stop the terrorist act. So straight away, there's that paradox about he's trying to stop something that's already happened,
Hmm.
right? And I was a bit concerned about that, because I thought this doesn't make sense. It's already happened. It's like when they were looking for the terrorist to punish him, that made sense. It was just an investigative tool. As soon as it was, let's stop the terrorist act itself, that created, a, for me, a timeline paradox. And in the end, his still living self meets. I hope if you haven't watched this bit, if you haven't watched the film and you intend to watch it, I'm about to give you a major spoiler. So about 10 seconds or so, call it 20 seconds. Don't listen. Okay. When he goes back, the self that went back actually dies, right? And as the lead actress is sort of sobbing and distraught that this person she's just met 10 minutes ago is dead, his then living self from that timeline comes and meets her.
But all I mean,
So why were there two of them?
but the thing is, that's the whole point of Hollywood and filmmaking. It introduces ideas which there's no proven way of even doing it. And as you said rightly at the beginning, it's full of plot holes. But the whole point of Hollywood is for entertainment and taking our money. We want to go and watch these things to be entertained. Whether they're real or not is irrelevant. But what
Yeah,
I
but
find
could you then? The
interesting,
question it poses: could you then have two of you in one timeline?
probably not. But then the question that's come up in, for instance, how Marvel deal with that scenario is that it creates a parallel timeline. So what happens is you have created, you've altered the future in your timeline. The previous timeline still exists. You can't alter that. You've now just created an offshoot into almost a parallel universe
No, that's
by
a fakery. Then
manipulating the past.
that's not time travel. That's a fakery. You are creating a fake timeline. If you like, I can fake or alternative.
Alternate.
Yeah, yeah. But you didn't actually go into the timeline that you started off with because you've created another one.
Yes, by you manipulating that incident at that one point in time has created an offshoot
Yeah, so
into
you didn't
another
time travel.
reality. Well,
You
that's
time
how
you
that's
time
how
managed, you time mangled, you time something, you
you've
did something to
timed.
time.
Yeah, you've timed. You've messed up something. You've changed the timeline, but you've now created a parallel environment. And this now leads on to another element about time travel, in so much that is time travel possible where you've got multiple universes and you're traveling. When you travel back, you're not actually, if you go back and you can view your timeline, yes, you can come back to where you were, but as soon as you manipulate it, you've now forked off into a different timeline, and you can have multiple timelines in many permutations. So and I often wondered, when Donald Trump became US president, we'd forked off into a different timeline because we were trundling along a certain way. And he was that point in time that changed it all.
So we got the bad timeline.
We're on this one now. I'm not saying good or bad. It's different. Let's put it that way. I mean, let's look at how a lot of Hollywood interpret time travel. I mean, the Marvel, for instance, Endgame or Doctor Strange, they talk about time travel. And Endgame, the whole premise of Endgame is exactly what you said, where a character in the present is been sacrificed, they've died, but then you go back in time and find the original character and bring him into the future, or you follow their timeline back to reality now where they haven't died. So it's all very different. Groundhog Day. Have you seen Groundhog Day?
Groundhog Day was
That's a different one. Is that time travel? You just get the repeat of the same day over and over and over
kind
again.
of time travel.
Yeah.
And of all the time, now that you've mentioned it, I think of all the time traveling films I've seen, that was perhaps the most coherent and consistent, to be honest.
It was very interesting.
It was very interesting. And somebody tried to work out how long how long he was going through that loop. I think it turned out to be something like 8 or 9 years or something.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting how the person did the calculations and tried to figure out.
See, that was clever. See, that was different.
That was different.
He's gone back, but he's repeated the same day and different outcomes each time, and then go back. So that's almost going back to the same timeline and then forking off a different way.
Trying it again.
But the only constant was him. Everything was unaware of the different forks in the time.
That means that the entire universe was going back for his sake.
No, it means that each
he
of
wasn't.
us
He didn't go back. They didn't drive back into their place of work 11 years later, did they?
No.
At the end of the movie, when there was no more time, there was no more looping.
Yeah.
They were back in the normal time.
But it was new, wasn't it? It'd just been created because.
Yeah, what I mean is, if he had 11 years worth of the same day.
Yep.
Right? Then the whole universe had to wait for that process to finish.
Well, it's not the whole universe. That almost belays the fact that it is a whole universe. You get your own personal universe. And this now asks the questions on not time travel, but certainly on the question of, are we in a virtual reality that only exists for us? So it's unique for us. So you have free will in your own virtual reality. So, for instance, you are seeing me, but I'm just
entitled at all.
Sorry?
Oh, that's not entitled at all. I create the universe.
No, that's what I'm saying. You get your own personal bubble of a universe. So, for instance, I'm not a sentient being. Everybody in your universe is not a sentient being. They're what's called an NPC, a non-playable character. They are all there. We are all here to.
This is beginning to make some sense to me, because I've always wondered about you, about all of you people. To be honest,
Okay, so
I
yeah,
was
you've
like,
got your own personal universe, and your game, it is your game of life, which effectively is what's happening. You've got to navigate this virtual reality, and you're the only being in it that has free thought.
hasn't this been
Everyone
poo-pooed?
else,
Hasn't this been poo-pooed?
has it been poo-pooed?
I believe it has. I believe it's there's a logical argument that I believe destroys this idea, but
Okay,
I can't remember what it is.
okay. But anyway,
I think it has been poo-pooed. I think because the other one is you can't prove I'm not God, which is is a funny kind of way is what you're saying. That I am real. And to me, I am real, and all of you could be NPCs,
yeah,
right? And another way of putting that is that you can't prove that I'm not God. Because
yeah.
if I claim to be God, but I refuse to offer you any proof, you can't disprove it. I let
Well,
myself down. If you want to kill
it
me, I let
depends on
myself
your
down.
definition of God, after all.
I suppose, I don't know. The idea is that we could, if we're not all, either we are all projections or we are all real. I'm trying to remember why. It's one of the two.
Okay. Going back to
It's kind of weird.
films and the way that they,
This has something to do with logical consistency, I think. Anyway,
okay,
because if you don't have the brain power, okay, if I, for myself, know innately I don't have the brain power to have created all these things, how are you an NPC? Do you understand?
yeah,
I innately know that I couldn't have invented this laptop in front of me.
yeah,
So, or the, and when I hear an airplane, flying overhead, as I just did, I didn't invent aircraft. I'm not flying. So, if you say that those are NPCs, then what is motivating them? Who is the motivator? Who created all this? Because a lot of this had to exist before I was born. As I became more and more self-aware, a lot of things had to sort of come into being to satisfy my experience.
bit like the Truman Show.
Yes, but more and more things are coming into focus when I practice international travel and their passengers. And why is it just X number of passengers? So I think there's a lot of this idea of it. I can't be speaking for myself. Now maybe you are the creator, and maybe you really do have that level of intelligence.
Why, thank you.
But having debated with you from I must say you hide it very well.
Thank you for
almost
that
genius
compliment and then
level,
taking it away. Yes.
genius, genius level fakery. Okay, whatever. Anyway, I think that's the idea. There's something like that. And what was the other? I wanted to talk about films. You said films, Groundhog Day. I've forgotten what it was. Repeating, going on repeat. Could it be? So what you were saying is that Phil, I think his name was Phil, right, in the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Phil was creating an alternate universe every single morning.
Yes.
Okay. Hmm.
And because of his actions, he
Well, why
changed.
was he constant then?
Sorry?
Why? But was he a constant person, or was he changing too? Was it a
He
new
was
Phil?
changing by the knowledge he was acquiring. Because by the end of the 8th year of the same day, he'd acquired skills, he'd acquired
Mhm.
compassion. So the thing that was constant was everything around him, but he was changing. And he took all that learning, that experience, and that's what changed him. And it's quite a profound film in a way in terms of time travel, because for him, he had to go through a lot of struggles mentally to discover that actually, if he embraced the world around him, used his skills, his talents in the world at large, he would enjoy it. And that was almost the lesson he had to learn in order to get past that day. And in a way, the time travel element was allowing him to go back and repeat the day and try again. And he learnt his lesson that way. Now, in our world, it would be nice to try and travel and have a look and see and fill in the gaps of our knowledge by going back in time. But for me, I want to go and fill in the gaps for the future. I know we're not supposed to know our future, but it'd be nice to know whether the big problems in society and in the world at large we have addressed if we could travel in the future. But
I once read a book many donkeys years ago. There's a book of shorts comprising short science fiction stories, and one of them was a story of a guy who invented a time machine.
was this the film, The Time Machine?
No, this is a book. It was just a short story in the book.
Oh, okay.
He invented a time machine, and he set it to go several hours into the future, whatever it was, and then he'd come back again. So he set the machine, he dialed it, and he went to the future, and he saw the future. It was nighttime and this and that and everything. And then the machine reset itself to go back to where it was.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for him, his maths was wrong. And when he rematerialized, he did so exactly where he had left, from the point where he had left. But you know what that means, yeah?
It means he's outside his building.
It means it's not on the planet. Earth itself has moved on.
Yes.
So he rematerialized in
space,
empty space, and instantly died.
Oh, that's interesting. Yes, that's very true, because the planet is moving. It's moving around the sun, and the sun is moving in the galaxy, and the galaxy is moving around the universe.
Calculations as to when you come back had better be really spot on.
Wow. It has to be relative to the previous movement that you've left. So yeah, that's interesting. Okay, I mean, I'm mindful we're getting close to the top of the hour here. So I wanted to touch on a couple of the other films that seem to deal with time travel. There was...
Have you asked yourself, what is time?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, here's an example, an animal, the sloth. You're familiar with it. It moves really, really slowly. And it's strange because they normally are in trees above water, and often than not they fall from the tree because they're moving very slowly, or they're gripping a branch and they may slip and they actually land in the water. And you think, gosh, a creature this slow, how has it survived? But it seems to survive in the water without having to paddle very quickly. But its whole world is very, very slow. So its time is, relatively speaking to ours, is slow. But in his world, a sloth's world, it sees everybody else maybe moving very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. So time is relative to the individual. Because let's say you could move at almost the speed of light. So you would move around, and everything as far as you're concerned would be almost stationary or making very small movements. So you in effect what are you doing? Are you going back in time?
I can never remember. I should try to work it out one day so I don't have to remember, but I do try to remember, and I think the person who goes and comes back has lived more than the people who have stayed, right? The people who have stayed are older than the person who has gone at the speed of light and come back again.
Yes.
So they may have gone for what they think is a year, but when they come back, everybody else has had like 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it is.
Yeah, but that depends on how far you go. Because I know there's twin brothers.
How fast and how fast?
Yeah.
How fast?
There's twin brothers who have gone into space. Well, one has, and the other's remained on the planet. And basically the twin brother has, the one who's remained on the planet, the twin brother who was off planet, who was on the International Space Station. So even that affects time. he has the brother who remained on Earth has aged by something like 5 milliseconds. So even though his twin brother was on the planet on the space station and he's swinging around the Earth at 17,500 miles an hour, which is fairly fast, his time has slowed fractionally whilst he's going around our planet at that speed. And so he's now the twin brother who's remained on the Earth is 5 milliseconds older. Now, if you scale that up, and the twin brother was to go much faster than this 17,500 miles, so you scale it up, say 10 times, 100 times, or whatever.
Close to the speed of light.
Yeah. Then his time would slow, whereas ours would remain relatively the same compared to his, but we would see that his time would slow. He would slow down all his movements.
I'd like to know what would happen if we went around the sun.
Well, it doesn't matter. The sun gravity will have an effect.
No, I'm not saying if we went around the sun. And we couldn't do it. No, to go around and to count off the days for himself, so that if he said, okay, I'm going for a year, that's 365 days, yeah?
Yes.
And then he comes back after 365 days, but finds that his twin brother had gone through 700 days, 3 years.
No, it's not quite as marked as that, because he was actually in the space station. His name was Scott
not space
Kelly.
station. I'm talking about near the speed of light.
Oh, speed of light. Yeah. Then we don't know. I don't
99.9% the speed of light, or something like that. Because according to Einstein, you can't actually travel at the speed of light.
No, there's not enough mass in the universe to do it, according to Einstein's theory. But if you get close to it, then time would slow down. And for others remaining on Earth, their time would move normally, as far as we're concerned.
But it's normally for both parties.
It's still normally because it's all relative, isn't it?
Time is relative. The guy on the moving platform, he's only experienced 365 days.
Yes.
Right. Well, according to his watch, that is 365 days.
Yeah.
His calendar.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the people on Earth, so time is not constant.
No.
All across the universe. It's like that, looking at the night sky when I was talking about that. It's almost like a fakery.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's not constant, but it's something we can measure based on the speed of light. And that's the only thing that makes it almost a sensible calculation, even though you're absolutely right. It's not constant because it's an observable. If you're going fast, it changes for you. So it is a big complex. Anyway, look, I'm mindful we've got to the top of the hour here. We could go on about this for ages because it's a fascinating subject, and we're a couple of numpties and we're not really qualified to talk about it. It was interesting nonetheless. Although I must stress, do you know the wormhole? Statistically, Hollywood makes it look like there's a big space that you can travel through, or a starship, etc. What science seems to indicate is if we did find a wormhole, it would be big enough for an atom. So even though it's fanciful to think that a wormhole could allow us to travel through time, I think it would only be limited to subatomic particles and the like, if it was even possible. Although we haven't actually found any as yet. At the minute, it's all calculations only. But anyway, in summary, Tayo, what's your thoughts on this topic?
I like the idea that time is a measure of entropy. And the universe is moving towards more and more entropy, away from its supposed initial state, where there was very little entropy. And because time is a measure of entropy, and because entropy on a universal scale never reduces, it only moves in one direction. And that explains why we can't go back into the past. And it is uncertain that we can go into the future. And there is a difference between macroscopic level and microscopic level, because at the subatomic level, there is far less entropy. And so time becomes, like you say, maybe send an atom through a wormhole. Time becomes far less well defined. There's this kind of space leveling between the ill-defined, less well-defined time at the subatomic level and the better defined time at the microscopic level. What that means for our discussion, I don't know, but it's at least the beginning of a beginning of understanding what the heck we're talking about when we talk about time. So based on that extremely primitive and, let's face it, not very well thought out ideas of mine, I don't think we can go back. I don't think we can do time travel, frankly.
No, I'm in agreement with you, actually. I think it's all fanciful and it does look good and makes great Hollywood films and books. However, in practice, I don't think it's ever going to be possible, other than looking back at recordings or videos, and that's the sort of time travel I'm talking about. But unfortunately, we have reached the end of the show for another week.